All right. So, Jacob, can you tell me what was your major? And without naming your university, do you feel like your university prepared you for after college? And also, what year are you in?
Yeah. So I actually just graduated. So I was a fourth year studying bioengineering. And I would say that my university, although I was kind of told going into the university program, you're going to have so many job prospects after you graduate. The minute you graduate, people are going to be knocking on your door asking, hey, do you want to work for us? I kind of went into this major with that impression. And then coming out of the major, I would say that was definitely not the case. And I think because the university spent so much time, so much time preparing us for these opportunities that were apparently going to be breaking down our doors, they never really took the time to tell us much about what life would be like if you didn't get those opportunities. I myself know a couple of friends who did absolutely amazing in their classes, got like 4.0s, 3.9, did a bunch of extracurriculars, and even they are still in this weird limbo where they don't know what they're going to do after college and they don't know what job they're going to take on. They haven't received as many offers as they were promised. And these are very, very high achieving students. So, me being somebody who didn't get the 4.0, who did extracurriculars and jobs, but also valued a lot of my social life and my personal life. So didn't necessarily get as involved as some other people. I'm kind of sitting here like, if all of my friends who got 4.0s and did really great in school are also not getting job opportunities, what really is there for me? So it's definitely this very stressful situation that I feel like we were put in. And COVID definitely did not make it any better, because I feel as though the university probably intended for there to be more job openings, because the biotech industry, for my major, for example, bioengineering, is booming right now. Plenty of people are getting jobs, plenty of people are able to get involved with this industry, regardless of what major you came from, regardless of how well you did in school. People were getting jobs, people were getting employment opportunities. And so, with the advent of COVID, obviously, there was a large spike in unemployment, and a lot of people lost their jobs, as well as a lot of the jobs that were previously open were now closed because these companies weren't able to afford for new employees to come through because of COVID. So I think this combination of COVID combined with just the fact that the biotech industry is booming in general, so a lot of people are trying to get into it, kind of has created this difficulty where immediately after graduation, you're expected to get a job. And then when you don't, or you get a job that maybe doesn't pay enough for you to pay off rent, or like taking on unpaid internships, it becomes very frustrating for students who are fresh out of college to continue this mindset that they've kind of been ingrained with in university, which is everybody's going to want to hire you. So yeah, I feel like that's been my experience so far.
And that's actually surprising to me because I'm thinking, San Francisco, you're in the mecca of tech.
Yeah.
So it's surprising that, well, I guess with the pandemic, that does create like a barrier of conflict with, lots of jobs and layoffs and whatnot. But still, the tech industry is huge. So you would think that students that are majoring in that would, get a job easily.
Absolutely. And I have a few friends who have told me that they got these really nice positions or they got into grad school. And it's always very exciting to hear like friends succeeding, because you spent your entire like college career alongside them, seeing them succeed and seeing them do amazing things. And so it's very exciting. But at the same time, like you can't help but feel like, yeah, I have a couple of friends that we just have this little group chat going on where we just complain about how we don't have jobs and we're like trying to search but nothing's really like biting. And I feel like that's a very common experience among a lot of students that go to university, is we end up just kind of creating these like, it's hard to maintain this sense of optimism for the future when the future seems so unknown and so bleak. And because of the fact that we don't have jobs yet and we're seeing like our peers succeed, we kind of start to get into this little imposter syndrome mindset where we feel like, what are we doing wrong to make the people around us get jobs, but us not, kind of thing. Yeah.
So what would you say, I guess without knowing about how the biotech industry is before the pandemic, what were your expectations after college, after you graduated?
Yeah, so my expectations going into university were just to get through, like, then go maybe straight to master's and then go into the industry afterwards. But I kind of realized that there are more paths than just getting your bachelor's, getting your master's, and then going into industry. And I have actually quite a few friends that did gap years, and their gap years were the most fantastic years of their life. They got to experience the world, they got to get some experience with industry before going to grad school. For myself, I'm not completely sure if grad school is in the cards yet. I'm still trying to determine that for myself. But I've realized that a lot of people, especially within the engineering community, kind of go into these spaces with the mindset of this is the one path that I'm supposed to take. And then when you learn about other paths, it's really fantastic to be able to explore those. And so I was really excited personally to explore the paths that I had presented to me. I think of myself as a very creative person, so I've gotten into a lot of design aspects, and I was hoping to reconcile this my interest in design with my background in bioengineering. And so I was told that there's like a really booming community in the biotech industry where, you know, you go to career fairs, you make networking connections, and then eventually one of them sticks and you get a job and you get to experience the life of a person who works in the biotech industry. And so I kind of went into it with this impression that I would be able to get a job right after college. And then like COVID hit. And I think before COVID, I had plenty of friends who were getting internships right after college and were being involved in the biotech industry. And they all had many amazing things to say about the biotech industry. So my thought process was, wow, I'm going to get involved in the biotech industry soon. Like, I'm very excited. And I've soon come to realize that the biotech industry is a lot more stressful than I feel like it was at first portrayed. I definitely know, like, in terms of the biotech industry community, once you get very like ingrained into the community, I think it's pretty easy to like transfer between different like departments or like get training in like other fields. There's a lot of places that offer rotation programs where you can learn different disciplines and then decide which one you'd be most interested in going into. And of course, there's like improvement in position opportunities or like promotions. And so hearing about all of this, I was very excited for the biotech industry, but then I soon came to realize that there's a lot of imposter syndrome. Like my friends who I was telling you had the 4.0s that got these jobs, like all went into their positions feeling very inadequate because they feel as though their education, while it did prepare them for a lot of the theoretical aspects, didn't really prepare them for the application aspects. And so I think a lot of people go into the biotech industry and end up being very surprised by what's presented because application of knowledge is very different from the like acquisition of knowledge. And so I think hearing some friends' experiences as well as my own experience working currently in an internship at a biotech like related firm or a company, I definitely understand what a lot of people are talking about when they say imposter syndrome. And I think that's definitely present in most fields, I would say. But in the biotech industry, especially when you're surrounded by so many professionals who have worked in the field for a while, and then you're also surrounded by the people that you've been working alongside at your university, and seeing them maybe being able to understand concepts easier than you, it's definitely it's a rough start for sure. But the biotech community is very, I would say, very close knit. You might not know every single person that works in the biotech industry because there's thousands upon thousands of people, but it's really cool to be able to develop your own like network of people and talk about biotech topics, talk about new developments in the fields, talk about like your jobs, like provide each other with new opportunities for learning and new opportunities for getting new jobs. So yeah, I would say biotech industry before COVID, it seems like it was very like close knit, and then the like COVID pandemic probably separated people a little bit because nobody could meet in person. But on the other hand, you were able to get so many more other opportunities to like meet with people in different departments because of the ease of just hopping on a Zoom call and chatting for an hour, you know? So yeah.
Right. So with all of that, and where you are now, kind of explain to me like when you graduated to the process of realizing I'm gonna have to move back in with my parents. And when I move back in with my parents, that mindset of what do I do next? Like, do you have that, idea of what you are gonna try to do?
Yeah, so I spent probably my entire spring semester searching for a job or an internship. I applied to a bunch of places, like way more than I can count. And some of them were obviously just resume drops, and some of them were full on cover letter, describe your interests, that kind of thing. But ultimately I like was kind of astounded almost. I wasn't surprised, but I was pretty like sad to see that like in terms of like people who just recently graduate, you can apply to tons and tons of places and only hear back from maybe like 10, like, or maybe hear back from only like 5. And so for myself, I'm very lucky that I was able to secure an internship. But of course, as all internships do end up being, it has to come to an end at some point. And so I was planning on taking my internship from home. And then I realized that I have such a close-knit community of friends and people that I really care about here in like the city that I'm living in right now, that I really didn't want to give that up. And I didn't want to like have this weird jarring end where at the end of graduation I just say okay bye to everybody and then go back home. So I decided to stay here for another summer, and I think it's probably, so far it's been one of the best decisions that I've made. But even just thinking about going back home after the summer ends, when my sublet in this place that I'm living at ends, it's very stressful to think about going back home, especially since I've earned some like independence while I've been in Berkeley, or sorry, I'm so sorry. Earned some independence while I've been in the place that I'm like living at right now. And I've been apart from my parents for basically 4 years now. So it's hard to think about going back home after you've already developed so many connections and so much independence um, at your university. And so I think going home is definitely when I'm going to start thinking about next steps. I do plan to move out as soon as I am able to like get an opportunity to, because I do feel as though I really do thrive under this like independence, like conditions of independence. But I think going home, although it does seem stressful, will probably provide me with an opportunity to at least like slow down a little bit and just reflect on my 4 years, as well as like start looking for new positions. And I do acknowledge that I do have a lot of privilege in being able to say that I can go home and like not have to pay rent and not have to worry about like thinking about getting money and like moving out. Like I do have a lot of privilege in being able to do that, but it's definitely, I think, something that's going to probably change my life for the better, to be able to reflect and to be able to actually look for a job and not really like rush the process of job searching, because I definitely did that this semester because I wanted to have a position for the summer. And I think in that, because of that, as well as because of the fact that I was taking classes at the same time, I was just so overwhelmed that I probably didn't do as well in every single interview that I was in. And I probably like overstressed this idea of getting into a job directly after college, when I did have this opportunity presented to me to move back home with my parents for a little bit. So I think moving back home and searching for those next steps will definitely be a fantastic opportunity for me, but it does definitely provide its own stressors and difficulties associated with it. So
Yeah, I was gonna say that, it is a privilege that we have parents or, a guardian to take us back in after college and be able to have that space of time to kind of reevaluate what we want to do, or reevaluate how we're approaching to get the job that we want. Um, but for me, it was kind of a mental shock, I guess, because as you said, you were away at your university for 4 years. You gained a life of independence. You probably found out more about yourself as a person, and now you're going back home, to your childhood bedroom where you were a completely different person. So now it's like, you're going through this mind trick, adjusting mentally to being under your parents' roof again, but at the same time trying to still keep that independent image that you built while away at college. and trying to transfer that into your new life, but you have to kind of stop at your parents to kind of rebuild everything. So I definitely uh, agree that it is a privilege for our parents to be able to keep us and be able to support us after college. But at the same time, it's also a mental struggle to continue to build ourselves up as individuals and feel kind of like a child in some ways. Because I was going to ask you, and I know you're in your summer right now, you still haven't moved back home yet, but are there any like cons or things that you just know are going to be annoying when you move back in with your parents?
Yeah, totally. First of all, that's a very good way of putting it. Like going back to your childhood bedroom where you were a completely different person. Everybody changes in college, or most people, I should say, change in college, whether you are expecting to or not. I kind of went into college with the same mindset that I had in high school. And my mindset in high school was just focus on studying, focus on like, not like, your social life is good, but like, it's not important, what's important is your classes. And when I got to my university, I realized like, wow, I'm a completely different person. Like I have different values. Like I value my relationships with friends and like people more than I do sometimes my academics, especially whenever friends are going through hard times, like there's been plenty of times where I've been studying for a really stressful midterm and a friend texts me saying, hey, I'm really sad this happened. And I just drop everything to visit them because like I care more about that relationship than I do about getting the A plus on this like exam. And so I think because my priorities and my morals and my values have like shifted so heavily from what my parents kind of ingrained in me in high school, going back into that space will definitely be like a huge con in terms of just being a completely different person. I think my parents are definitely people that value the idea of like work and the idea of like making like money and stuff like that more than like the connections sometimes. And I think because my values are basically entirely flipped from theirs, there's definitely going to be a huge barrier in terms of connecting to them. And I think that's another thing is just connecting with my parents. Like because I'm such a different person, it feels like even when I go home for holidays, it feels so much more difficult to connect with my parents and have conversations that don't end up spiraling into political discussions, as you may or may not be able to relate to. It's very difficult for me to connect with them because they think of me as this person that's not who I am because I did change while I was at college. And so I think developing that connection deeper than it already is going to be very, very difficult for myself, especially given that I have like different like identities that I came into and like discovered in college that like my parents are like not super like understanding of or like are not completely like aware of how to treat people with like those identities and stuff like that. And so I think it's definitely going to be like a big struggle trying to readjust to that space. And definitely whenever I go home, I feel this weird sense of like stressed nostalgia. I don't know if you can relate to that, but going home, I feel this sense of, wow, like, my old stomping grounds, this place, I used to be here all the time, but then you're also sitting there like, so when's the next flight back to where I'm living at right now? So I feel like for me, my university was my getaway from home. And so now not having that space as being my getaway from home, I think is going to be rough to adjust to for sure. So there's definitely some cons involved in the process of moving back, which I guess complement in my like opinion, sometimes overshadow the pros. But it's definitely going to be an adjustment period. And yeah,
Yeah, and
hopefully I'll come out stronger on the other end.
you brought up a good point about the connection part of it, because it's not just the physical environment, of being back in your childhood bedroom, but it's also realizing, you're older, obviously, when you get out of college, you're more of a quote unquote adult. Um, so it's like you're kind of, in a way, getting to know your parents as adults.
Yeah.
And before you went to college, you were a high school student, essentially. So you're a child essentially still as a high school student. So when you come back now as kind of like a full grown adult, they expect that same child, but you're not that child anymore. So it's like
Mhm.
you're kind of readjusting and getting to know your parents as adults, as their own person and not your parent.
Yeah.
So that provides challenges too. Um,
Absolutely.
so I don't know if you can speak to any of those challenges you might have faced, or even you don't even have to be in their environment, but maybe like a conversation you had, over the phone, or maybe even when you went um, home for the holidays. Like you don't have to bring up anything personal if it's too personal, but just speaking to that challenge of connecting with your parents as an adult when they still view you as a child.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest realizations I had about this was it's gonna sound very like high school stereotypical, like my parents used to have like a curfew on me for like getting home. And so now that I'm an adult, I've kind of like there's been nights where I stay out till like 2 a.m., like hanging out with friends, like walking around, getting food. Like there's some places in the university that I live at that like boba shops or like food places that stay open until 2 because they know students are going to want to hang out and like go get food, and maybe they're having a late night studying so they go out and get food at 2 a.m. And so I remember very distinctly going from this environment where I was staying up till like the late hours of night and then waking up maybe a little bit later than usual. And so I went back home, and I remember, I want to say this was either freshman or sophomore year. I remember like staying downstairs, and my parents at that time went to sleep at like 10, 9:30, 10, especially since they have to wake up early because they both like go to work like 9 to 5. And so I remember they were going to sleep at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I was just kind of staying in the room that we were all hanging out in. And they go to their like room and they say, okay, like lights off, like go to bed. And I was like, what? Like I'm an adult. I make my own decisions. I can stay up however late that I want. I can go out and be out for however late that I want to. And they said, well, while you're under like our house, you're gonna live under our rules. And so I think in that moment, I felt so much like I was just reverting back to my high school ways of like going to sleep when my parents did, waking up when my parents did, and having had this taste of independence and being able to make my own sleep schedule, like decide where and when I want to be at like all points of the day. I think it was very jarring to like hear that, and took a like probably a very like long amount of time for us to actually come to a conclusion on like what the next like solution was, because my parents like they do care like a lot about my safety. And so like when I was in college they didn't know a lot about like me going out at like 2 a.m. and but like when I'm back home they know like very well whether or not I'm home, and they like know that I'd be, if I'm out, like they care a lot about my safety. And so I'd get like a bunch of texts or a bunch of phone calls while I was out like at 12 a.m. like, where are you, like why aren't you home right now? And I think adjusting to that was it was definitely like one of the moments that kind of like sticks out in my mind the most. It definitely like we resolved everything, like came to a conclusion, and that was based on like just a conversation, like talking to them about how my life was in college and how it's different when I'm back home, that kind of thing. And I think although it's a very like trivial example, and there's definitely other instances where I feel like we've kind of had difficulties adjusting to each other as both being like adults instead of one being a parent and one being a child, was very difficult. But like although this was like a very trivial example, I feel like it definitely like kind of goes to show that even in like the smallest aspects of life, like it's hard sometimes to adjust to this change. And I think it's hard both for the student and the child and for the parent. And so I think that's one of the most trivial yet the most interesting examples that sticks out in my mind as something that I had to adjust to. And I think that's something that a lot of my friends have had to adjust to as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, like a parent has a right to, worry. They have a right to know our whereabouts because obviously they raised
Yeah.
us, and they give us the resources and the ability to go to college. But at the same time, I feel like they kind of have to just have a moment to step back a little and
Yeah.
realize that we are becoming our own selves, our own adults, and they have provided us with the resources to be able to build out our own lives at this point now.
Yeah,
But they
absolutely.
don't necessarily have to be the helicopter parent
Yeah.
anymore. But I know you're kind of in the middle of it, but after you have graduated from college, what advice, if you have any, would you give your college freshman self compared to being like a college graduate?
Yeah. Related to going back home after college, or just related to anything in college in general?
Anything, even life
Yeah,
advice.
cool. One of the biggest things that I try to tell every single person, whether they're a freshman, sophomore, junior, or even like a senior, first semester senior, is that it's never too late to try new things at school. I was very like my freshman year, didn't really take any extracurriculars that were that interesting or exciting. I kind of just showed up to class, and it was my science classes. So I had chem, I had bio, I had my bioengineering class, and then I had math, and I think those 2 semesters in freshman year were like the roughest semesters that I've taken. And then I remember taking in my sophomore year, first semester, a music course about the history of music in like the United States and in America, and like the roots of like the music that we currently listen to. And just taking this class was nothing related to my major. It was just a breath class that I was taking, but it's probably one of the most impactful, if not the most impactful class that I've taken on campus. And it was the first time that I've ever taken a class that wasn't part of my major. And I realized, wow, there's this entire world of classes out there that you can take that, people have access to. Like I had access to this class as a like bioengineering major, and it's a music class. What? They're 2 very different things. And so I started to branch out a little bit, take more classes. I took a PE class to kind of learn new ways of like getting in shape and exercising. And that was really impactful. And then I went even further out in terms of classes that I took. I ended up taking a tap dancing class. I took a parkour class. I've taken a like user interface design class, which has kind of stemmed into my interest in wanting to work in potentially UI UX in the future and user interface, user experience design. And this most recent semester, I took a animation class where I learned how to 3D animate, and we created a little bit like a 1 minute short, and had a little showcase. And I feel like all of these classes that I took just unlocked new interests that I never knew that I had. Like now I'm very interested in getting involved and having like being involved in animation. I've learned new like ways of exercising that I never even knew about before. Like parkour was its own form of exercise, and I never even knew it because I just thought of like that one episode from The Office, like, and so it was really cool to develop all of these new interests and learn so much more about these different like classes that were available to me in these different disciplines that I just never even knew about or tried to get into. And all of these disciplines have kind of developed in their own like little ways into interests that I continue to pursue to this day. And so my advice to anybody, but especially college freshmen who still have plenty of time to be able to think about this, is to take classes that are outside your comfort zone, take classes that you never expected yourself to take classes that will challenge you and push the limits of what you know and what you think your major or your discipline is all about. Because the more classes that you take, the more experience that you get, and the more, you never know, you could unlock a new lifelong interest, or kind of like me, unlock a new potential career path for you to go into for the rest of your life. So that's kind of what I would say is my biggest piece of advice for anybody coming in as a freshman.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Because when I went into college, I majored in marketing initially because I backstory a little bit. I was kind of into fashion at the time in high school. So I wanted to get into like fashion design or fashion marketing. And I don't know if you ever heard of the school, Savannah College of Art and Design, SCAD.
Yes. Mhm.
Um, but at the time, I guess it was like a building program. So they didn't have like a fashion marketing program. And my dad didn't really want me there. One, because it's super duper expensive, and he didn't want me to deal with a student loan. And two, the fashion marketing wasn't accredited yet, so it was like brand new. So my dad didn't want me to like go on faulty ground with something that wasn't going to be, very strong in its foundation. So I kind of backpedaled to just do marketing. But I took a marketing class. I loved it. The teacher was very energetic, but I just couldn't see myself doing that for a career.
Yeah.
And I've always had an interest in TV and film and like understanding how, everything gets created. And I realized I had like a communications course. So with a focus in TV cinema, I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just try that. And with the major being under communications, I was able to like take other classes like sociology and general studies and kind of hop into different things under communications that kind of opened my perspective to different things. And I changed my minor from Spanish to general studies, and that also allowed me to hop into different courses and classes.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree that, when you're in college, definitely use all your resources and take any class that piques your interest, because it's definitely going to help you in some shape or form. You never know what opportunity you're going to get once you get out of college. So seeing that on your resume, it helps.
Yeah, 100%. I could not have put it better myself.
Yeah. Let me see what other question I had. So I guess I know I heard you talking about being a biotech engineer, but you also seem like you mentioned you're a creative and you've had, you know, kind of a dabble in other classes and interests. So what is your ultimate dream? Like, what do you see yourself doing overall?
Yeah, so this I feel like is the question that I always get when I go back home, like what are you going to do with your life? Like what is your dream? What are your aspirations? So I actually am still kind of trying to develop that myself, and I think that's another thing related to kind of what we were talking about is it's hard to graduate and not know precisely what you're going to do, because I kind of, like I said, going into college thought that there was this one path that everybody followed, and then coming to the terms with the fact that I didn't really want to follow that path. I wanted to explore new opportunities, try new things. Has been a very jarring moment, I think, for me, or a jarring experience to determine that. And so I realized like pretty late into my college career that I didn't want to do pure bioengineering. The research aspect wasn't for me, and the sitting at the desk doing equations was not for me. I took this one design class that was at the that I was told to take, or like not told to take, but recommended to take by a friend of mine who was interested in design. And so at their like whim, I kind of took the class and realized this is fun. I could it was a 3D modeling class. So we basically used this program called SolidWorks to create these 3D objects just out of like thin air, basically. And I had never tried anything like that before, and it was such a fun experience because I could sit behind my desk for hours trying to solve like why won't this piece of the object like shape itself into the way that I want it to. But I literally was sitting at my desk ready to fall asleep or ready to give up on an assignment if I had started and worked on it for 15 minutes. And so I started realizing that I kind of wanted to pivot a little bit in my junior year going into my senior year. And luckily enough, my university offers a certificate in design innovation. And so I looked into that a little bit, learned about some classes that I could take, and actually decided to try and pursue this certificate because I never went for like a minor or a double major, but I did want to do something extra. And I think it was really cool that my school offered that for me, because I looked into these classes, and one of the classes that I took that fulfilled this requirement, which was the class I was telling you about earlier, the user interface design and experience class, was probably, I know I said earlier that my music class was one of the most impactful. This one was also, I would say, those two were definitely the ones that really shaped my college experience. And the reason why this one did is because it opened up this entirely new world that I had never known about of human computer interaction, which does have like a lot of relatedness to the biotech like community. My current position that I'm interning in is right now is a user experience, user interface intern at a pharmaceutical company. And so there are these little like nooks and crannies that you can find yourself in, where you can go into these slightly less technical positions um, while still being involved in this biotech field. And so I think that was something that I kind of started to look into in that junior, senior year experience. And after getting this design certificate, I realized that design was something that I wanted to go into full time, not just as like a hobby or a passion or a side project. I wanted to incorporate it into what I was doing with my life, because I do have this creativity that I just never really got the chance to express in my bioengineering classes, because they were all very, here's this equation, plug it in when you see this instance, use a different equation when you see this instance, versus design, I feel like gives me the opportunity to express this creativity in a way that I've never really been exposed to before, because I've only really known STEM my entire college experience. So I definitely think that going forward, I want to go into some form of user interface, user experience. I also know that I have a bunch of like passions and like side hobbies that I like to delve into, like music or animation now. That will also help with that, like being able to express my creativity. But I definitely, that's one thing that I don't think I'm willing to compromise on like anymore, versus I used to with my bioengineering classes, was I want something where I can really like create, you know, and I can really make something from scratch, or, you know, contribute to like a system that I feel like I'm making an impact in. And so, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I would say is my current path. I don't know how that will manifest itself in terms of a career or where I'll end up living in the future, but I do know that it's something that I've recently discovered and that I'm excited to pursue.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting, actually. It's funny, as you were talking about creating and whatnot, for some reason, I don't know if you ever seen Black Panther, but vibranium came up to my mind. Uh,
Yes.
like just them in the lab and creating all that, just like out of this world technology that we don't haven't even discovered yet. That's what came to mind. So
Yeah,
it sounds
absolutely.
really interesting.
Which is really cool, because like the entire like Marvel Cinematic Universe was like nothing, and then it was created by one person who then like just developed all of these characters, all of these powers, all of these places. And just thinking about how it started out from scratch all the way into what it's become now, is a really, really cool thing to see and to experience and to have been able to be a part of, because everybody that's kind of grown up or like been alive during this like time period has like known Marvel and like seen it develop from the grassroots all the way up to what it currently is now. So
Yeah, definitely. And
cool
after our
process.
recording, I'll share a little backstory about myself because I have a connection to Marvel. Um,
Wow.
but two more questions.
Yeah.
Um, we've all been through it this year with 2020 and the pandemic. So, you personally, have you learned anything about yourself through this pandemic, and life in general? And if you can speak to anything, maybe you learned about yourself that will go into your career, but just what have you learned, if anything, about yourself?
Yeah. One very quick superficial thing that I learned. Remote work can be fun sometimes. My current position is remote, and it's great to not have to like commute. It's great to not have to worry about like, you know, waking up super early in the morning and then showing up right at like the door of your company that you're working at. I know myself, I do have those days where I wake up at 8:57 right before my 9 a.m. meeting, you know. And it's really cool that I've been able to see that that's something that I can do, and like remote positions I feel like are now going to become more, hopefully more widespread. And I do appreciate being able to clock out at 5 and then go do whatever I want, you know, without having to worry about commuting home or like that kind of thing. And so that's one thing that I've discovered is really nice. And although remote work can also be very difficult sometimes because it's hard to develop that community with the people that you work with. And oftentimes like some companies will not provide their like workers with the resources that they need to efficiently do remote work, as well as a lot of people live in situations where they aren't able to get personal space to be able to do remote work, for example, like apartment living situations and stuff. It's still really cool to see that like this could potentially be an avenue that I could like look into working in the future. But beyond that smaller element, I would say one of the biggest things I learned during the pandemic is that it's so important to, I guess, develop like a relationship with yourself, which sounds like, I guess that's kind of a weird way of putting it. But before the pandemic, I used my apartment for sleeping, basically. I went outside to the library to like hang out with friends, to classes and stuff, but I was constantly surrounded by people for my entire college experience before COVID. And I never really got any self-reflection time for myself, and I never really got a chance to reflect, wow, how is my college experience going, which I think is why it took me so long to discover that I had other passions besides this major that I was in. And then once the pandemic hit, I was spending a lot of time alone, you know. My roommate left within like the first 2 weeks, I want to say, of the pandemic hitting. And then our other housemate left. So it was just me and one other person living in the apartment. And I didn't really go out that often. Obviously, it was hard to hang out with friends because everybody was inside and worried about COVID. Rightfully so, because COVID was a big deal, you know. But I think so sitting alone gave me a lot of that like self-reflection time. And I realized like I'm kind of like afraid of my own thoughts, you know, like my own self, you know. I feel like after getting this reflection time, I realized like I'm not in the place that I want to be, like financial wise. Like I was struggling to like pay rent and stuff. Like life wise, I was like worried about like friendships and relationships, and like trying to like stay in these like toxic friendships and situations that I was in without even maybe realizing that they were toxic in the first place. Like career wise, I thought a lot about like what I wanted to do and then realized I don't know what I want to do. And so a lot of my like pandemic experience was me sitting alone with those thoughts. And I tried my best to like busy myself any way that I could, FaceTiming friends, like getting into like exercise, like playing video games, like anything to get my mind off of it. But there was just so much time to fill during the day, and you can't fill every single hour and every single minute with something without having to sit alone with your thoughts for a little bit. And so I think it kind of was stressful and scary to me at first. And then as time went on, I realized that it's actually something that's very beneficial, both for your mental health and for just planning out life in general. I was able to actually like sit down and think, what do I want to do with my life? Like, what are my interests? What are the pros and cons of going into these different fields and getting involved in these different disciplines? And I think I would not have done that if it weren't for the pandemic. So the pandemic was a horrible, horrible event that did take the lives of many people. And it was in like just a lot of things went wrong. But I do think the one thing that I do value out of this experience is having to be alone with myself and my thoughts, and being able to actually like grow into the idea of being alone and having alone time, you know, time to recharge, time to relax, time to de-stress or decompress from a stressful time or a busy day. And I think that's something that I will continue to implement or like work into my own life and my own schedule as I continue to pursue this future plans of mine.
Very well said. And I can completely agree with you that this 2020 allowed us or pushed us, if we didn't want to reflect, have that self reflection, and kind of be more in tune with where we're at emotionally, mentally, spiritually, all the things. Because we've been on this, whether we recognize it or not, we're always very external, like hanging out with other people, friends, family, fulfilling expectations at the job, always pleasing people or hanging out with other people. We never really had that like force, like you're gonna sit down and you're gonna just have some time to reflect, or we couldn't get away from those negative thoughts or whatever past experiences that you haven't worked through. Those came back up because we had to face those things at some point. And with the pandemic, it kind of forced us to face those things. So it kind of helped us. Well, I can't speak for everyone, but it probably helped some of us heal those parts that needed to be healed, and also kind of reflect on what we want for our future that we probably wouldn't have had the time to reflect on if it wasn't for the pandemic. So it is unfortunate how, so many people's lives were lost, but on the other side of it, there are plenty of survivors, and not only survivors in the context of getting the virus, but survivors in the context of, healing from things that they've gone through that they probably didn't know that they needed to heal from.
Yeah.
So that connection is definitely well needed, and it was well said.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. But last question, I guess, what advice would you give to college graduates that are looking for a job, or the ones that had a job promised to them, but it got revoked because of the pandemic? So what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think this is something that I've kind of thought about a little bit, considering my own experience with like how things have gone with not only the pandemic, but with just finding a job in general. Um, my roommates, if you ask how I was doing during like March, February, April, when I was searching for a job, they would definitely have some words to say about the state of my mental health, the state of my like physical health during that time, because I was just constantly job searching, and both my roommates are very accomplished people who are going to fantastic like programs in the future that they applied to and got into this year. And so I was really, really excited for them. But then part of me was like, what am I doing with my life? I'm sitting here trying to find like a job, like I can't even find anything to bite. And here my like roommates are doing these amazing things with their lives. And so I definitely felt a lot of that imposter syndrome. And I think imposter syndrome is, I've brought it up before, but it's one of the like worst things in the existence of the universe. It's very hard to, or it's very easy to feel inadequate as compared to your peers, especially when you're seeing them succeed and you're excited for them, but at the same time, seeing yourself maybe not succeed as much. And so one thing I would say is to just try to reflect on that imposter syndrome. Don't try and push it away, because if you try and push it away, it's just going to come back even harder. But try to reflect, like, not only think about what you have done in the past, but think about the things that you have done that maybe your peers haven't been able to do yet. So that was one thing that I think helped me through a lot of things, is like thinking about, oh, like my friend has like a 4.0, like has this really amazing biotech internship, but they have not like had a job, like versus I made an effort to get a job like that could pay like money, so that I could have some spending money, have some money to pay rent, and have some money to pay for groceries and stuff. Like thinking about how I like went for most of my college experience, like paying my own rent and having a job and getting that experience in terms of like human interaction experience, getting the opportunity to speak to a lot of really amazing people through my jobs and my positions that I've had on campus as well as off campus. Thinking about all of those experiences that I've had that the other people maybe have not had kind of helped reconcile this frustration of mine, and thinking, wow, look at all these things that my friends have done that I haven't done yet. Because everybody has their own path and their own journey through life, and each journey and path is completely valid. And like everybody does their own thing, and it's great that everybody can do their own thing and yet still be able to come together and be a part of this like shared global community, or be a part of these smaller communities that develop with different disciplines. And so I think one thing that I tried to do like was just to try to like think of things that I've done that I'm really proud of myself for, and being able to do that helped fight away that imposter syndrome. And it's still there. It always is there. I think it always will be there. You could be like the most powerful person in the world or the most influential person in the world and still have that imposter syndrome. And so it's just important to like acknowledge those things that you've done, and acknowledge how far you've gone and how much it's taken to get you to where you are today. And that's definitely something that I used to help fight off that imposter syndrome, which I think was like probably one of the biggest things for me when it came to reconciling the fact that I was going to be moving home, or reconciling the fact that I have not experienced all of these amazing job opportunities after college. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely well said again. um, but yeah, it's hard to, I guess, reflect on what you have done that's, worthy of giving yourself praise, because I think we're constantly told to look to the future. What are you going to do? What are your plans? So we're always like subconsciously looking ahead and forget to kind of acknowledge what we've done so far. So to be able to kind of stop and give yourself some credit, goes a long way. And I'm like a natural planner and organizer and whatnot. So it's kind of hard for me to even give myself acknowledgement on the things that I've done, because I'm always looking forward to my goals. But
Yeah.
it's essential sometimes to your mental health to kind of just stop and like, okay, like I'm proud of you. Like looking at yourself in the mirror, like I'm proud of you. You've done this, and that. Like give yourself some credit and just take it one day at a time.
Yeah,
So
totally. And that was very well said too. One day at a time, I feel like has been my motto for the the pandemic, is just, just take it step by step. Absolutely.
but I'm on mute. Okay. Yes, exactly. Okay. Well, I think that was a pretty good wrap up of everything. So I'm going to press the stop recording button.
Sounds good.